Hello and welcome to another album analysis. In today's video we're going to be taking a look at the 6th studio release from the alternative rock group Silversun Pickups. Their 6th album is titled Physical Thrills. Much of the album was actually written during the course of the lockdown, something we're seeing quite often now. A lot of studio albums that are being released this year, or certainly have been so far, have been impacted and have been affected by the events of COVID and the lockdowns and how that's kind of made people feel. And this is definitely what this album does as well. Brian actually stated in an interview that this song was kind of something in between a collection of songs and an imaginary friend that he kind of had with him over the lockdown to keep him from losing his mind and just really to help put things into perspective. Because of this, similar to Widow's Weeds, we do see a much more open, kind of honest kind of sound coming from the band for this. Certainly much more exposed in its nature, whilst also keeping some of the main weapons that they do feature in their arsenal. Some really nice harmonies between Brian and Nicky, that unique kind of sound that we do expect from Silversun Pickups from Brian's guitar. It's something that he really loves to use, only on occasion, not always to big full effects, but just to kind of scatter around into different songs. However, will this lead to this album being a physical thrill or a bit of a spill? Without further ado, let's take a look at it track by track. Opening the album, we do have Stillness, Way Beyond. Now this opens with a very kind of haunting, down-tempo kind of sound, very eerie, which was a bit of not something we're too used to hearing from them. Usually they do have some slower pace, but not this haunting kind of sound. It's definitely something new, and that's something they're going to do a lot on this album, is try a lot of different new things, really add some more tools to their disposal. This track also shows us how much of the album is going to be a lot more scattered. There's going to be lots of kind of random bits and pieces thrown in at times, sometimes working to a good effect and sometimes having the opposite effect and not really adding too much to the song but more taking away from it. We also get this eruption of sound towards the end of the track, almost very sporadically, and that's something, again, they've done quite a lot on this album, almost kind of emitting those feelings that people did have over the course of the lockdowns, kind of jumping from emotion to emotion at the drop of a hat, and that's what they've kind of tried to emulate with this sound on many of the tracks on the album. Then for track 2 we do have Sticks and Stones, which has a very nice kind of southern American intro with the guitar. It just certainly feels like almost like you could be in a favela or something like that, or kind of like a Brazilian market, something along those lines, which is really interesting. Again, just these little tools that they kind of want to throw in, almost kind of keep it extremely random, which is definitely a welcome kind of addition to the album. This track also has some really nice guitar work from Brian. It's really kind of subtle, very subtle undertones, but it really does stand out on this track. The only thing I don't like about this track is we've got these really random distorted sounds just thrown in, just interspersed throughout the track from Joe, and it's not something I think particularly works very well. There are occasions on other songs where we're going to see this really used to full effect, but this is one track where I do feel it subtracts from the actual song itself as opposed to adding to it. Then we've got Hereafter, Way After, and this is a song very piano driven in the intro. It's really nice. I just like the use of different instruments. Kind of each song has a different instrument really driving it. We've got guitar work on some, this one very piano driven, which is really nice. This song also does feel like a little bit of a throwback towards some of their early material from the likes of Carnivus and Swoon, almost emitting a very Royal We kind of sound, which I do like. I think that's probably one of the albums where they did their best work on those earlier works. Nothing wrong with the most recent albums, but have not had that same strength as earlier releases, so great to see them kind of moving a little bit towards that sound with some of the tracks on this album. Following on from that, we've got Dream at tempo 050 or 50 if you prefer to call it that way. The first of 3 interludes that do appear on this album, and you can imagine with them having different numbers, they have different tempos. It kind of makes sense, and I kind of feel like this is a nice way of looking at it. They're looking at like a lot of dream-esque kind of landscapes here with some of the sounds they're using. And they're talking about kind of going through nightmares and stuff on a couple of the tracks, which we'll get to later on. So these kind of almost feel like different emotions shown through different dream sequences. So for the Dream at tempo 50, we have got this very soft lullaby almost kind of sound, almost like you are actually in a dream, using Nicky's very soft vocals just to really emphasize that, really keep it nice and quiet, keep the levels nice and low, almost as if you are in a dream. Then we've got the song that was released as the first single from this album in the form of Scared Together. And this is a song all about coming together through hardship. And upon its initial release, when I first heard this single, it took me a little while while. It grew on me and I've come to enjoy it more and more. Another thing I don't like about this album, similar to Sticks and Stones, there are a couple of really weird sounds coming from Joe on this that can really get irritating to the listener after the first couple of minutes, which is a real shame. And I really don't want to feel like I'm bashing him too much, because there are a few songs on this album where he does have some great work that's really kind of helping build that undercurrent for each track, but there are just a couple of sounds on a couple of these songs that just don't seem to quite fit right, or just certainly kind of take away from the other things that are going on in some of the tracks. But one thing I really do love about this one is how they kind of suddenly kind of add this frantic pace. The whole idea of being scared, you like frantic, quick, short sounds, and that really adds to the immersion, the idea that you're in there, you're kind of scared, frantic, things are going everywhere, instruments are being thrown in left, right and centre, and the whole point of trying to emit that emotion of being scared is done so brilliantly in this particular track. It really is a great way of doing it, just kind of all of a sudden just pick up the pace, very frantic, and then just drop it back to a lower pace all of a sudden. They repeat this a couple of times and it really does work to a great effect. Then we've got the other song they did release as a single in the form of Alone on a Hill. Now, I love this song. This is brilliant. I really was glad when I first heard it. I'm just so glad that they've kind of given Nikki her own song. She's always had these brilliant vocals that she's worked alongside Brian with. They're brilliant at doing harmonies. It's one of the kind of cornerstones of their sound. It's something that they've kind of built their empire on, really working together in those harmonies, and it's what brings out the best in Silversun Pickups. But apart from that, I just think it's great to finally give her a track effectively where she is the key figure. The track is mostly all about her. And she did say she's always struggled to kind of come to the forefront. She's struggled to kind of want to have that song that's just kind of hers and hers alone. And they could do a couple of things I really love in this. There's a very simple use of a trumpet, almost kind of gives that idea of triumph, kind of emits those emotions and that sound, almost like a salute as well, which is really great to see. And I think her soft vocals really do lend themselves very well to this song. We've got some really nice lyrics interspersed in there as well that are slightly changing throughout the course of it. This isn't all about connection, this isn't all about attention. And it kind of draws on the idea that sometimes it's okay to be on your own for a little bit. Sometimes you need that. Sometimes you need that space to yourself. However, too much of something can become really bad. So again, referencing to the idea of a lockdown. Having some alone time is great, but too much of it, and then you've got the beast coming in, you've got the waves rolling in, these kind of hard things that you've got to kind of battle against. And I really do feel this is one of the strongest tracks on the album because it's something so different. It's not something we've ever seen them do before, and I think it's something they definitely need to do more of because it is really powerful and she works great on some of those softer songs. Following on from that, we do have Hidden Moon, another track where it's just full of absolutely everything. We've got some slap bass, we've got a crazy random riff just thrown into the middle of the track from Brian. It really has got lots of different elements, but it is a little bit overloaded with just sound, which sometimes can work if they're trying to build that franticness, but this song kind of feels like it should have a slightly slower, softer tempo to it, but it's just kind of, with all this sound coming in, it can be a bit much on the ears at times to really pick one instrument out, and they don't blend together all too well at every moment in the song. There are a couple of parts where it does feel a little bit disjointed. Maybe that's what the intention of this song was, but it definitely does kind of stand out as one of the tracks on the album that isn't the strongest in terms of the elements that it does have in it. Then we have got the track System Error. Now, I really enjoyed this track. I think it probably was one of my favourites on the album. There's a couple of things they do in this. They do actually have an almost robotic kind of sound to Brian, almost like a little bit of distortion on the vocals. Not too much that he's completely kind of sounding like a human robot, but just enough to kind of give it that technological edge to it. And it's something that works really, really well. It gives off vibes of the Mars Volta, some of the thing they've always done, played with distortion very heavily. And I like because the song called System Error, you think of computers, you think of technology, and it works really, really well. It also has a great bass line, which I really did enjoy on this track. It also gives it a very powerful, very strong flow. And this song really does come together very well. We do have this very polarised sound to this album. Some of the songs seem to work together so strongly, so well, and others seem a bit scatterbrained, almost kind of like they're all over the place. But this one is definitely one that's tied together in a nice, neat little package. Then we've got the track Emptiness. Now, I know I've been bashing on Joe about a couple of the other tracks we have had a little bit earlier on, but he does some great work on this. He uses some really good samples, and he also did the same in System Error as well. I kind of have to give him credit for his distortion in that, and some of the effects used there were really, really good. He does do some great work on these two tracks. It really adds a nice undertone, nice undercurrent to these songs. Also provides some smaller elements that just kind of add that niche kind of elements to the sound that really do work so very well. We've got some really good good harmonies on this track between Brian and Nicky, really again just emphasising one of the biggest tools in their arsenal, something that just works to such great effect in any song where they throw a harmony in. And one little trick they really did do on this track, which I really like: empty nest, you think of a home, you think the kids have flown the nest or something like that, or someone's not living in a house anymore. But what they do is actually in this track they kind of have these moments where they kind of bring the music to life again, almost like you're getting a visit from a family member, and it brings life back to the empty nest. And that's what I really love about this. You get these bursts of energy, almost like you're having a visit or receiving a visitor, which I really do like. It's something very subtle that they do, but given the nature of the song, I really like how they've done this, and it does make it one of the stronger tracks on the album. Then we head into our second interlude, Dream at Tempo 310. So you can imagine this is going to be much more fast-paced, much more chaotic, very high energy from Brian on this one, very fast-paced, really just kind of slams through it. So this is almost as if you're waking from a nightmare, that kind of when you wake up out of a nightmare and you're a bit scattered, a bit not sure where you're actually at, and you kind of, did that just happen? Is this real? And I really like the way they've done this. I like they've got these different tempos, and I'm glad this one isn't stuck at the end of the album, because it would have had it a bit of a frantic ending. So kind of putting it in the middle is almost a great way to do it, kind of intersperse these interludes. And I like the difference. I like interludes. There's something that isn't used to full effect on a lot of albums, but when they do, most bands are pretty good at making them work, and I really like the way they've done it on this particular album. Then we've got the track We Won't Come Out, and this has got a really nice funky bass at the start of it. They've just thrown so many random elements into this album overall that it was quite an interesting one to hear. It almost reminded me of kind of Chic, or that kind of 70s disco kind of bass line, almost like Stevie Wonder-esque, which was quite nice to see here. They also do have some really nice layering in this track, almost kind of generating the idea of echoes, showing distance through the use of layering. And then again, we've also got this increase in sound, this eruption of sound, which I really like. It's almost more aggressive, almost like you're trying to tell someone, we won't come out, in a very aggressive tone, but it's done through the instrumentation as opposed to kind of increasing the harshness of the vocals. And that's something I really like when bands do, when they don't just rely on the vocals to do the work, to emit the emotion. You can use the instruments as well, and that's something that Silversun Pickups tend to do. Although Brian can show that more aggressive side, you've seen it in songs such as Lazy Eye and many others that they have recorded over the years, but I like when they use the instruments to kind of tell the story as opposed to just relying on the vocals. Then we've got the track Stay Down, Way Down, and this does feel like another throwback kind of track to some of their earlier material. Chris has some really great drums on this one. I think it really helps it chug along. We've got a lot of nice elements in this particular track. We've got great use of the acoustic guitar as opposed to something heavy, which really does give it a kind of nice twang to it. Kind of gives it a great flow as well, with Chris and the acoustic guitar working in tandem to really keep the song having a very nice flow. Then towards the outro of the song, we have some more really nice layering that really does work so very well on this track. It really gives it that powerful outro, that powerful edge to it that it needs. Then for the final track on the album, we do have Quicksand. Now this is a very slow, dark kind of track, showing a complete kind of polar opposite to most of the tracks we have had on this album. And it's something that you would think would be very difficult for them to pull off, with Brian having kind of almost a more of a high range kind of vocals. It's something that you don't really get to see from them that much, going to them dark places, but I think it's something they wanted to explore with this song being about lockdown, the idea that many people went into a negative headspace, really struggled at certain points, and it felt like you maybe were in quicksand. So I think that's what this song does try to convey, and they've got to go to those dark places to kind of help emphasize that effect. Then rounding out the album, we do have Dream at Tempo 150. So you can imagine this is in between the other two interludes in terms of its tempo. It makes heavy use of static and a couple of other distorted sounds, just kind of slots in nicely between the two, and it just serves as a nice way to outro. We're not leaving you on the quicksand, we're not leaving you in that dark place. It's just something to kind of break it up after that particular track, so you're not listening to the end of the album going, oh, that's a bit miserable. So you've got something just to break that up, which is really nice. So overall, I do feel this is a very strong album. They've got some really great tracks on here. Then they've managed to throw in some new tricks to their arsenal, which I do really love. I do feel there are a couple of songs that are just missing out, or just a little bit overloaded, which does take away sometimes from some of the great work that is going on underneath in terms of the instrumentation. But I'm glad to see the band have really tried to expand on their repertoire of tools that they do use, and there's the styles that they use as well. I mean, Alone on a Hill is a brilliant track. I think the standout for me though, my favourite on this album has to be System Error. I really did enjoy that distorted vocals, that kind of almost prog rock kind of sound they've thrown into it. I did really enjoy. Also Empty Nest as well, another brilliant track. They're probably the main two I would pay attention to outside of the singles which they did release. I mean, Alone on a Hill needs no introduction itself. That was an absolutely brilliant track. I think overall I'm going to have to give it probably a 7 out of 10. There are a couple of things just holding it back, as I say, those distorted sounds that just don't always work, but I love the diversity of this album. I think it's definitely one of the stronger ones they have released over recent years, and I really do think it is great to see them try some new tricks. That's everything for today's video, but as always, please do feel free to let me know your favourite song and let me know your thoughts on the album as well. Also, if you do enjoy this kind of content, then please do feel free to subscribe if you want to see more of this kind of video, and I will see you in the next album analysis.